from the top. Another former colleague reached out and said, you need to talk to this guy. And who was he talking about? He was talking about Philippe Beaudoin. I'm probably bastardizing that name, but thankfully in the actual interview during our conversation, Philippe gave me the Anglophone get out of jail free card and said I could call him Phil. I can call him Phil. So Phil and his team are working on a really interesting project. They are building an AI-based social network, a new type of social network. It sounds like it's the kind of social network that maybe if we still want social networks, this is the kind of network we want. I had a great time talking with Phil. Super interesting cat. Let's take a listen to how that conversation went. Phil, how are you?
Very good. How are you, Grody?
I'm good. I am very excited that we were connected. I think, I'm probably going to comment on this maybe in the preamble as well, but it seems like there's a possibility that I could create a podcast where all I do is interview people who used to work for Google. Like I just find people who used to work at Google or Alphabet in general, because I did speak a couple of weeks ago with a guy from Sidewalk Labs, Andrew Miller, which was a wonderful conversation. Where am I finding you today? Where am I reaching you?
I'm in Montreal. Nice and very, very snowy Montreal. We got the worst snowstorm of the winter on April 4th.
No way. I didn't know that. Ugh. I mean, Montreal is the YouTube algorithm, so reliable. Yesterday promoted a video to me about like Montreal, the city you didn't know you should visit, kind of the best city in North America, which I'm sure is hotly contested. But I've had lots of opportunity to come to Montreal. I love it there. It's such a warm, welcoming city to visit. And now that you are, it's been a while actually. I think you and I had 2 years of overlap at Google, but we never met. We had never crossed paths because the engineers and the salespeople most of the time they don't let us.
Yep, exactly. Just yeah, I was mostly working on Chrome here out of Montreal. It was I stayed for 5 years. It was super fun, but indeed, we had even a small sales team in Montreal. It was a very small office, and we didn't get to interact too much with other side.
It's like there's like a chalk line separating don't go over there. Don't scare them. Don't either side. Don't let the engineers scare the salespeople. Don't let the salespeople scare the engineers. So what is exciting you about technology? We'll get into Waverly in a minute, but I had an interesting conversation with a academic friend of mine a little while ago about her point of view, her thoughts on AI. But what's exciting you about technology now? Like what is possible through the lens of the art of the possible in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, if I had to boil it down to one thing, it's that this advance in large language model, natural language understanding is making something that only techies were able to do before. People like me would spend way too much time studying computer science and that kind of stuff. And it makes that available to everybody. And I don't think we understand what it changes yet. But at a fundamental level, for me, what it means is that suddenly people will be able to control their technological environment in an unprecedented way. So back before LLMs and natural language, we had to, devise fancy UI and expose some of the controls, but not everything. And, you could write a plugin if you were a programmer, but if you weren't, you were stuck in the environment. Well, this is changing. And what it means is that we will, I think, get a much richer, more diverse technological environment, and some of the sacred cows of the past will die. And this is what we're trying to do at Waverly, kill one of these sacred cows.
What are those sacred cows? Tell me more. Tell me, what are we killing?
I think we're killing the idea of recommender systems that don't care about you. So like these things, these recommender systems, like I use the term and people are like, oh, let me fall asleep. But they're super important parts of our lives now. They're you call them the YouTube algorithm or the TikTok algorithm. But
Right.
these are they're the engine that power the information that get to reach our eyes, that we get to interact with every day. And these things have traditionally been controlled by our behaviors, our clicks, what we do when we open TikTok, when we browse on YouTube, where we pause, where we stop, what we search for, all of that. These are behaviors, but they're not behaviors we do with the intent of controlling the system. They're behaviors we do just as we use the system. And and yeah, exactly. The outcome of that is that we've got recommender systems that are really, really good at knowing these behaviors, but that are not really interested in about who we really are, like where we want to take them, where we want to go, what we want to learn about, how we want to grow. And this is being unlocked by natural language understanding, in my opinion.
Right. And so, so instead of a world where we're behooven to, however, a platform might decide they want to push and publish content or whatever into our faces, you're envisioning a world where the person, user, as we like to call them,
Yeah.
the person has individual has a certain amount of control of that by choosing how they want to apply that large language model
Yeah,
capability.
the person, the community, a group of people. And I envision it much more as a dialogue between the system and that community than as a one-way street where a person uses a system and the system snoops on the person and learns about them. But yeah, now it can be a dialogue. You can interrogate the system and say, why am I seeing that? Or, you know what? I feel I'm going into a bit of a rabbit hole. Maybe I can change. And you can do that individually, but you can do that, as a collective. You can say, hey, we're in Montreal. French here is important, and we're struggling on the internet to find French content. But we could say, hey, we're a group of people, we care about finding French content. Let us devise an algorithm using natural language that will promote it a bit more than if it just looked at our click.
Right.
We will even be able to do that as a family. I mean, so many families have issues with controlling screen time, and the kids get addicted, and you're like, and you don't want to go into a mode where you say no screen at all. But with these things, you can go into the nuanced world of, hey, what is it we want in our technological environment as a family? How do we devise algorithm for us here? And it's going to be much more of a design process for people than something that they just are submitted to. It's going to be more like designing your house and deciding, hey, do I buy a library with nice books in it? Do I set it up in this way, that way, in that neighborhood or that neighborhood? So it's going to be more of a design process because suddenly we like these technological tools can interact with a much wider audience.
I like the phrase interrogate the system because I feel like that's absolutely what we can't do today. That's the antithesis of like what we have today. There is like we're kind of at the mercy of many systems, right?
And
So that's a really interesting way to think about it, especially in knowing what I do know about large language models. So then, and I know we're already talking around this, but so let's talk about Waverly.
yeah.
Um, what's how do I get in? First, how do I get into the alpha? That's my first
Well, it's our first week. I mean, it's ready. It's running in prod, as we like to say as engineer. It's running in
it's in
prod.
prod. We
It's in
put it into
prod.
production. Yeah.
But
I'll call back. I'll reach out next week and we can have that conversation. It seems it's an ambitious exercise. So, I was I was recently talking with somebody. I was talking with a dealer. I deal with a lot of automotive dealer clients, and we were talking about the notion of TikTok, and we were kind of just saying, not even really, we weren't interrogating the system. We weren't asking a lot of questions about that, but we were more discussing the idea of it was a product that was very unnecessary in that we already had that problem already felt solved, right? We already had video platforms, we already had ways to consume video. We didn't need another one that was even more addictive. Like we didn't like and so in that lens, and kind of through with both of those component thoughts of like, do we need another one? Like, do we need another social network? And how do we address as you already mentioned, my teenager's addiction to social media? I would love your thoughts and opinions on both those topics. Like, do we need another one?
Yeah.
Which I think because you're building it, the question.
My answer is yes, but I'll tell you why.
Tell me more.
So, so as you were saying, Waverly, it's a new social network. We've designed it first and foremost for communities, for people who care about the space they devise for their members. And so that, you can think of it a bit like a Facebook group that would really care about the group members, or a Reddit that would finally step into the 21st century, whatever. No, but like, we're thinking about it like, okay, you're a community, you have members, you want a space that really cares about your values, that really tries to understand how you want to run the space, the kind of conversations you want to have there, the kind of topics you want to see discussed, all of that. This is like the idea of Waverly is to say, okay, what if a social network really cared about the communities? So do we need another one? I think we do. I think we need a new generation of social network. That's what we haven't seen. TikTok is very, very much the culmination of generation one. It's basically, is it something new? Well, it's a video platform. Okay, vertical video. Started short form, slowly drifting towards longer form. But in truth, it is just like the ultimate algorithm. It's as if the first generation of social network has been, let's look for the algorithm that will allow us to make our content more and more and more addictive. Because that's all it's about, right? And TikTok, I'm like, okay, they won the prize. There you go. Take the cake, go home. You've won that. But it's not the world we want. As you were saying, it's very unnecessary. Like, even the people who love TikTok will complain about that addictiveness. They like the short form videos. They like, it's unapologetic. It's, that's all cool, but it's super addictive. Like, you get into these doom scrolling sessions and you're like, that's not really how I want to spend my time. I would wish to have a bit more control over myself. And sometimes you just feel ashamed and you won't even admit it, but it's just like, gosh, right?
Just in a closet in the corner, doom scrolling endlessly. Is that the...
I have to uninstall it on my phone. Otherwise, and now all my social platforms are trying to get me into TikTok mode by throwing reels at me everywhere. Anyway, another topic. But yes, we need another generation of social network. And that's what we're trying to pioneer with Waverly. It's basically saying, hey, let's look at a social network that really cared about you through these dialogue systems, through this transparency, through respecting your privacy. But now it's possible. It's possible to do it at scale with people who are not technology nerds because they can just chat with it. So like the idea here is, like, let's usher in that new generation. What would it look like? Let's build it. Let's bring in the people who think we need that. And like, ultimately, what we believe is that this next generation will be much richer than the one we've had. Like, instead of having 4 or 5 social networks, there will be a bunch and they will interoperate together. You won't need to be on the same social network in order to interact with someone else. And as a result, it's going to be a totally different landscape. And that's what we need. We need a different landscape. We don't need a new social network.
Right. Yeah. It's like back to first principles. We need to start a bit of a start again, restart, do over.
Exactly.
The one of the so I teach a digital marketing and social media class at Georgian College, and one of the things, two interesting things, well, there are many interesting things, but only two interesting things that are kind of relevant to this conversation from my students who are all 18, 19, 20 years old or so. They I did a bit of a survey of them early on in the semester, and you know I found this interesting. It's a room full of, it was 20 students and me, and it was 20 iPhones and one Android. Was kind of interesting, telling, but also in terms of their media consumption and their social network usage. Um, I wasn't really surprised by this, but obviously they like the number one, number two platform on video was Netflix, YouTube. That's where they're spending their eyeball time. And when it came to social networking, um, and this is true again with my son as well, who is 15, just a few years younger, going to be 16 soon. They're big Snapchat users, which is very strange to me, but it's kind of, there's a generational, you don't want to be on your parents' social network phenomena, right? You don't want every decade, every whether it's X to Y to millennial to you know Gen Z, it's kind of the, you don't want to be on your parents' social platform. Is
Yeah.
when you think about Waverly and you think about your go-to-market strategy, who who is outside of me next week? Who is in the first users? Who is the audience you want to approach first?
Yeah. I would say it's resonating really strongly with Gen Zs who are growing up. Okay, so like there is this reaction you have as a teenager where you say, okay, we need to move past our parents' world. But then as you grow up, you reach a point where you're like, yeah, but at the same time, what do I care about? Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like you ask yourself the tough questions and you go back towards things like, hey, I need to be curious. I want to learn. I want to grow as an individual, as a person. And the platforms that they've used traditionally cared very little about that. Um, and so that's just like we're trying to make that space available to them, and they respond very positively to that. They are, at universities, early at universities, or they, they just entered the work market, and they feel like, suddenly, like maybe this is the platform for me as I mature, right? As I grow up, and so this really touches me. That's what we want to be, and to see us resonating in this way with that generation really touches me. It's just like I'm totally fine with all the other platforms. I'm fine with that desire to want to break with your parents thing. I would actually even love if there were more than one Waverly eventually and people chose the one that worked best for them. But to hear them say, hey, I have a space that cares about me as a growing up person, as a person who wants to become something, who has a goal that is not necessarily reflected in my usage of TikTok or Instagram or Be Real. Like to be that platform for me is just like, yep, that's where we wanted to be.
I forgot about Be Real. I guess it's like,
I
I forgot.
have kids too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is a. I think that's a very loyal but small audience. It's funny. I completely forgot that Be Real. I think I changed phones last fall and uninstalled, like didn't reinstall the app and haven't thought about it since. Funny, the the way you're envisioning this, like clearly you're very sympathetic and earnest in the thought exercise you want to put into the platform, which I think is not the way anyone has built one of these platforms previously. I mean, I think the the what's the phrase? It's on your website. Not intention, not attention.
Exactly.
It's quite brilliant, quite smart, but it then begs the question: how do you afford it? How do you both? I'm sure from a future investor perspective and maintaining the platform and keeping keeping all the fives, all the lights, five nines, all the lights green and all the nines. Well, I think we want more than five nines now, but
all the all the nines there after. Yep.
right.
Like
But how do you envision the if we're not if we're not because if we're not focused on attention and we're not trying to build the addictive platform the way that every other
yeah.
platform has been built, then we're probably not talking about an ads model, or we're talking about a very limited contextual based ads model. Then what is the path for revenue for you?
Yeah. I mean, there are ad models that can work with that. There are more and more brands who want to be on a platform like that. They find that the core values in TikTok, even though it puts their ads in front of a lot of eyes, they don't resonate with them. And at some point you reach a point where, okay, like what do we stand for? And right now there are no alternatives. So I mean, okay, you're going and advertising on these platforms, but as the alternatives become available, we think that we will be one of the best brand for the brands who care. Again, brands who really you want to say, hey, we're not about addicting your kids. We're not about creating you're promoting fake content or hateful speech, which tend like even though these other platforms don't intentionally do that, it tends to happen because hateful speech, anger, addictiveness, these are all like they translate into engagement given their engagement model. In our case, the engagement model is, as you said, intention, not attention. It will probably mean that people will spend less time on our platform, but we don't see that as a bad thing. You know, people like if it's a richer diet and people enjoy their time more and they talk about it more and it means more to them in their life, I think the ads on that platform will be way more valuable. That being said, the ad model is not the only one. There are some of our communities, like for example, you're doing a recipe book community. Ad models might work for you, but we have more and more communities of journalists or people who really care about good quality content. They have a loyal user base and they have tiered models where they can have a first tier where people get some content for free. They have a second tier where more of the content can be paid for. Like we want to be the perfect platform for things like that so that the ad model is not your only option. We think that the web will slowly shift to a more balanced diet of monetization models. And we want to be the perfect place for that shift to happen.
Balanced diet of monetization models. So you're coining a lot of new phrases here, Phil.
That's it. When you build the future.
When you build the future. That's wonderful. So, so if you're targeting so you're Gen Z. Gen Z was your entry go-to-market demo, and potentially the journalists who are currently on X and want somewhere else to go, who are like, if only I could, and if then only the audience existed on Threads or Blue Sky today, which it doesn't seem to be materializing. One of the other things that came up with my other academic friend, which was super interesting, and I hadn't really thought about it like this, relative to AI. She posited the idea that one of our near-term future challenges is that so much of the large language models are built on information that is from the internet. Like they're built on data, from the internet, and now people using the internet are using large language models to create content. So it creates a weird, and that content isn't necessarily better quality, right? It's not, it's not Shakespeare. It's not Shakespeare. If Shakespeare is some benchmark of quality, and maybe it is or isn't, that's another debate for my English literature
But
friend.
at least he wasn't using AI.
Wrote it, or somebody wrote it. There's lots of debate around who Shakespeare was, but it was human written. And then it becomes cannibalistic in a way of, if we're building the model off of the internet, and now the internet is heavily populated with aggressively built, spammy pages and content from LLMs, it's LLMs building LLMs. And do you see that as a problem? Like, do you see a way around that when you think about the way you want to apply that technology to Waverly. Talk about that a little.
So LLMs will have the same problem that we do, right? We are struggling to find good quality information, trustworthy information. And LLMs will struggle with the same thing because, and as you said, there is this weird feedback loop. They are very useful tools for generating more content, not necessarily high quality content. People who have bad intentions can use them to generate whatever content they want. So there's more pollution in a sense. And when there's more pollution, your ability to filter becomes more important. So LLMs will have to build filters, but I think more interestingly, us humans will have to build these filters. And when there is more pollution in your informational environment, trust becomes super important. Where did the information come from? So traditionally, trust was, I trust this newspaper, I trust this news source. You had a couple of these things. We've moved to a world where there's a lot more diversity in the sources. And I think kids like that. I think people growing up like that. This diversity of voices means that you can explore a lot, like many more things. You can find who you are in a much richer way. I don't think we're going back from that. There is more authenticity in what's being shared. This podcast is, it's very authentic, and it wouldn't be possible in the previous world. But at the same time, you care very, very much about the quality of your content. So how will we go back? Like, how will we have both trust and diversity, I think, is the big question. And for me, the way to do that is, again, is more intentionality in your network, in your connections. And when we talk about Waverly, I talk, a lot about, hey, let's build an algorithm that understands your intention, that surfaces content you care about. But ultimately, that algorithm, the way it works, is by understanding the trust relationship that you have. Like, oh, this community you think is really, really good at surfacing news about cats. I don't know, right? And this community is really, really good at helping me understand philosophy of the mind. I don't know, right? And you have all of these, but these are trust relationships. And you suddenly get a picture of the internet filtered through these trust relationships thanks to your algorithm. But in my opinion, it is, how do we build more semantics or a better understanding of the relationships that you have into a system? And this is how you completely change the dynamics, the economy of information, so that it's, yes, crappy content can get produced more easily, but it doesn't surface as much. So there is less incentive for people to do it. I think this is how you tackle the problem of making bad content easy to author. And that principle, that process is useful for humans, and it will be similarly used to train future generation of LLMs.
I mean, the internet is a long love affair with cats, so it's a fair topic to bring up. Right?
It's also one of our first communities. Waverly is the catnip times, and we love her. It's amazing.
That's brilliant. I still, my wife cannot stand it, but every once in a while I just send her completely randomly and without reason the link to the keyboard cat video on YouTube. I just, for no absolutely good reason. And she actually doesn't like it. She loves cats and she can't stand that video. And there's also the intersection between philosophy and cats, right? Because you got the whole, is the cat alive in the box or dead in the box problem. There's
Schrodinger.
Yeah, you got a Schrodinger philosophical intersection. So those groups might overlap at some point in the future. What are your thoughts, considerations? What energy will you put behind, either through technology means or through human means, moderation of the platform? I mean, I agree that if we can build a mechanism, if the platform doesn't overtly promote the enragement instead of engagement, and if it also kind of de-incentivizes the creation of that content by not promoting it, then you address some of the problem up front, but you don't. But people still are people on the internet. So the question of moderation comes to mind around how do you manage that? How do you envision Waverly will address that? And does it require, an infinite number of monkeys on an infinite number of typewriters, or is it more a we've given consideration to this in the way we've built the system, and the system addresses some of that in the way it's been intentionally constructed, and then beyond that we have human moderation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, these are all really good questions. First of all, it's a multi-pronged approach, right? To think that moderation is only one thing is a mistake. If you change the algorithm, you change the dynamics of content creation, and the need for moderation changes. But it's always going to be there, like no denying. There is something else that we do that's very different from existing platforms is we kind of assume the best out of people. And we think a lot of moderation goes very quickly into finger slapping mode when the person who was creating the content had good intentions. They just maybe didn't read the community guidelines, or they didn't search for the question before they asked, but they were like enthusiastic and they're like, hey, I love that community, I want to post. And then they get moderated, and it creates this spiral of anger, right? If you get slapped on the finger, if you had good intentions, you kind of like, oh, I don't like that community. And you quickly get into that spiral of anger. So we like to think of that instead of moderation. Our first reflex is facilitation. We are building an AI that tries really hard to understand your community guidelines. And then when someone new comes to your community, they write their first post, they have a direct line to that AI. They have a DM almost with the AI as they write, so that they get nudged in the right direction. If they're asking a question someone already asked, they will get a little message from the AI saying, hey, maybe you should post that as a comment. If they are on a topic, drifting the topic in a way that the community doesn't like, they will get notified as they write. It's a much, much better experience than being slapped on the fingers after the fact. So that's another prong. And then there is moderation. Again, we think that the approach here is to have platform guidelines, like every platform. This is what's acceptable on the platform. This is what's not acceptable on the platform. But then to let individual groups set their own guidelines, which may be stricter than the platform guidelines. So for example, if you're running a philosophy group and you want every question, like every post to be in the form of a question, you should be able to ask that. It's not going to be a platform guideline, but it's going to be one of your community's guidelines. And we've very rarely seen that, like that kind of facilitation or moderation at the community level in a way that's very empowering for communities. And on Waverly, you can take that very, very far. We've had some experiments where a community, we did this thing at this fake community called AI Glam Squad. And it was all news about AI, but it had to be written in the voice of, Valley Girl speak. It's hilarious. If you don't post in the Valley Girl speak, you get the little AI that nudges you, say, hey, I can't do it, but it nudges you towards writing it in the right voice. So it's kind of funny. It's kind of playful, but it really works. And it creates this diversity of spaces that have their own rules. And it just creates a healthier and richer, more diverse ecosystem.
I mean, you could have an entire platform where you're only allowed to speak in Valley Girl. That would be
well, when you are in that space, it's how it feels.
Yeah, that's good. That's hilarious. You're giving me ideas. This is not actually good. I think
that's the entire point of Waverly. So rich and flexible that people will do these crazy, playful things.
Yeah, I have to stop in my own brain right now because I'm feeling. And in this wave, we only speak in haikus, and in this wave, we only quote The Matrix, and in this wave, it's only Nine Inch Nails songs. Sorry, only songs that might have been written by Trent Reznor.
What I haven't told you is you actually have this co-creation mode with the AI where you can kind of brainstorm with it and eventually come up with great Matrix quotes or whatever. Or so it's a really fun process.
Matrix is top of mind because there's a news floating around today that there's going to be a fifth movie that there's going to much like social platforms. I'm not sure that we need. I was okay with the first one. I didn't need the other three, to be honest. But and we probably, yeah, we don't need the fifth. But sorry.
It's all right. If you interview him, like if you interview the director, you ask them if they wanted a new generation of movies.
Right. Yeah. One of the other things that came up in my class, a very precocious student said something when we were talking about the current state of social media, and I was presenting to them content that I had received from Meta, from TikTok, and that I already had access to from YouTube. And the resounding trend, even if this was not the original intention, and this is, Elon has been public about this with whatever we're calling it now, Twitter, X. I still can't call it X. I can't do it. Yeah, right.
Later.
Yeah. Because then you want to call it a tweet, and then you're like, is it a tweet or a post or an X? What am I doing here? I don't know. Anyway, no, that they all want to be video platforms. That X is getting more serious about video. TikTok, YouTube already pretty natively video platforms, longer debate of whether it should be horizontal or vertical, and that Meta increasingly both on Facebook and on Instagram is promoting video more, right? That they're really leaning hard into that attention side of that equation. Is how is video treated on your platform, or is that kind of a future consideration, a roadmap consideration? But when you think about, in a way, you're going to go to bat with some pretty heavy players already, and video seems to be the order of the day, and it's the media that the kids these days want to create on their supercomputers in their pockets. So how do you think about that? How do you want to address it? What is it? How do you envision it looks like in Waverly?
Yeah, we think video, like democratizing video, can be absolutely awesome, right? I mean, we've seen and we love like high quality, diverse videos that you can find on YouTube. Even on TikTok, you have creators that really care about their content. It's a powerful medium. It allows for human connection, genuineness. This is what I think a lot of people care about. I sure do. So we want to support it. We're not starting there for technical reasons, but we want to support it. Again, we think that we haven't seen, like, YouTube is trying a little bit, but we haven't seen that many platforms who, again, try to curate a video feed for you that would focus on these aspects. It's not about, sometimes it is about watching someone bake a nice cake, but it's not only about that, right? And right now it feels like you can't decide how you will browse your platform. You're just like, you open TikTok and it's whatever's there. So again, it's about adding intentionality to it. It's less about the format itself. We think that the video format and the ability for everyone to create video is super interesting, and it's going to become even more interesting when the economy change, when the dynamics change, because people are more intentional in their request.
I mean, I find opening up TikTok is like pulling the arm on a slot machine. I have no idea what I'm gonna be watching if I crack open that app. YouTube surprises me, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's not good. Like sometimes it's a very pleasant surprise, and I'm like, how did they know? Like, I'm not sure I've ever watched this artist or this creator before, and I'm not sure, but yeah.
And Spotify is another one that's kind of interesting, right? We forget about music, but they will, like, I don't know, I don't use it that much, but my son uses it a lot, and he tells me about how good it has been at recommending new artists that have very, not a lot of listens, but that are still very much his genre. And I find that, if we expand this way of working to more platforms, to different type of contents, it's going to be amazing for everyone.
I mean, I think the Netflix is the 500-pound gorilla that we forget about, that is so good at that that we take it for granted until you happen to jump into your wife's profile and realize everything is just a variation of Downton Abbey. Like when you like it's my profile, is a lot of action movies and action content, and my son's is a lot of anime. There's a lot of anime in there, and my wife, it's all variations of British BBC TV shows that they will recommend to her when I'm not around. But yeah, I agree. I think you're right. If you can crack the nut on a humane, and it comes down to trust. Like if you trust that the recommendations you're getting are in fact content you want to watch, and don't introduce friction in a way where you're like, actually, I don't know why you're showing me that, then you kind of solve a problem people didn't know they need solving.
You, you've nailed it. And trust is built on transparency, openness, dialogue, respecting your privacy. All of these things we now, I think, have unprecedented access to thanks to large language models, AI, natural language interfaces.
I've got maybe two or three more questions that are all over the place, frankly, all over the place.
Go, go.
So the first one is related to, so I, for a very short period of time, at one point in my career, I worked with a team that helped migrate effectively a social network from a US team to a Canadian team. I worked briefly on Hot or Not many years ago. Excuse me. Yes, I know. From your face, I can tell the reaction. But you couldn't build that platform today for a lot of reasons, and it doesn't really exist. I think somebody's using the domain and pointing it to a dating site, but that's also kind of relevant because they were the dog that caught the bumper on the car. Like they didn't know what they were doing when they built that platform, and then they were like, how do we monetize this? And the monetization mechanism became a dating mechanism, and not intentionally, but I think legitimately it's not like they had a requirements document. It's not like they went through any kind of journey mapping. There was none of. They literally, I think, woke up after a frat party and were like, what if you could talk to the hottie on Hot or Not? They're like, oh, we should build a messaging solution. And that was how that product got built. But the extended thought beyond that was it did become a fairly successful platform for people to meet. And I think covertly, when you think about Facebook, and somebody recently was telling me a different story now, which is so strange, about LinkedIn, that these platforms become dating platforms. Like whether you want to or not, the same way we might have had interaction around the water cooler and we might have gone out for drinks after work, the after work drink experience is now how we interact on our phones. So how do you think about, I don't know if it's a problem or not, but is that a behavior to encourage? Is there a mechanism to support that? Is that sort of we'll just leave that to like Waverly After Dark? Or what is the thought process you have on that, knowing that it's inevitably going to happen? Or as I said, when I at one point when I was getting a tour of one of my university residence buildings when I was in university, one of the residence tutors said something like, there are 400 beds in this building, there will be sex. That was the like, there will be. So when you bring millions to tens of millions to billions of people together, things will transpire. How do you think about that?
It's a good question. I must say it's the first time I've had it. Just thinking on my feet here, I believe that's like the social thing in social network is what makes them amazing, but it's also very much about these human connections, right? And that's what we want to be about. Like ultimately, we talk about the AI and all of that, but we really don't care about AI. What we care about are people connecting with other people in a way that's meaningful to everyone. That's where we're going. And when you have meaningful connection with someone else, like naturally, you want to build on that. You want to, hey, let's have another conversation. Let's go for a beer. Hey, whatever. I I I think it will happen. I don't want it to not happen even. Like if it never happens, you know, what does it mean? The fact that people are saying, hey, some people date on LinkedIn, yuck, right? Well,
I mean, that was weird. That's
but
like, I think LinkedIn is becoming Facebook for people over 45.
yeah, I know they haven't destroyed it yet.
Not yet. Not yet. There's still a modicum, like a thin veil of professionalism that's there, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be cracked and fall apart. So
But it also feels a little fake sometimes, right? It feels a little,
inauthentic.
let's keep it professional, which might be like it's a good way to instill trust. Like if you know that we're going into a conversation and it's gonna stay professional, that can be really good. But at the same time, when you're looking for this genuine connection experience and all of that, if people don't dare to swear every now and then, like, are you really talking to the person or you're talking to the corporate facade of that person? So I think that's partly why LinkedIn is popular with some groups and not others. When I think about Waverly, again, what I wish is that for some of the waves, some of the communities there to evolve into, hey, here it's professional, no dating, no personal stuff. This is how it works. And for others to be like, nah, here anything goes. This is the spirit of the land. We're free, hippie, whatever. And to each his own. What we haven't seen a lot of are these super diverse platforms that embrace groups as they are, that create spaces for these groups to be. I think of it a lot more like a city almost than a social network. In a city, we're okay with some buildings being corporate and very professional and others being like, it's a bar, it's a party place. You go there and yeah, maybe there'll be sex. Who knows, right? But we're okay with that. And we've never really thought of our social networks with that level of diversity. We imagine LinkedIn comes with a very specific culture. That other network comes with a very specific culture. But as you start to explode that, and as these networks become more like a collection of diverse spaces, then maybe we start thinking about them in a different way.
My with only a few minutes left, one last question. A little bird told me that you made a board game. You made a board game. I want to know everything about the board game. I was intrigued this week in the news. There's like a new version of Settlers of Catan that's been made available that has like a weird new angle on energy, that it's kind of been modernized, and so you have to decide, like, are you going to deploy an oil rig or like a solar field, which I think is quite entertaining. I think I would love to play that game. It really leans in on my own interests and wheelhouse. But tell me about the board game and tell me how I get a copy of that too.
Oh, I mean, it's gonna be easier soon. So I fell in love with board games, I don't know, back at university or something, and precisely because of the social interactions in them. I've always, first of all, it got me away from my screen, but it's also very much about humans being with other humans with a given set of rules, and then what do we do here? And they can go all over the place, super diverse, very very creative, and naturally, as I started discovering the medium, I'm a creative person. I was like, I need to do my own. So I started building my own designs back then, and I made one that got noticed by some publishers. It's called Quebec. It's on the Quebec City. If you've ever been, it's a gorgeous. It's like I describe it as a European city here in North America. So it was the 400-year anniversary of the city. We built a board game. We designed a board game for that. And we got it published by a Quebec publisher, a French publisher, and a German one. It was, I think, 12, 13 years ago. So you can't find it anymore. Honestly, the game got really, really good reviews, like the mechanics and all of that. But the design is not that great. Good news, though, it's coming out again next year. some German publisher found it somewhere. I don't know. They played it. They found my name, called me, and like, I want to publish your game again. So it's coming out next year, I think, in Germany. The design is gorgeous. I've seen the first versions of it. And if you like Catan, you're gonna like that game. It's kind of strategic. You're building the city, buildings by buildings. You try to convince other players to help you. If they help you, they gain something, but you gain something too. So it's a very fun, dynamic game if you like that genre.
That's amazing. I love that. I think what you should do, which you should plan for, is maybe a Waverly sponsored tournament in Quebec City where you bring, I don't know how you decide whether through whatever means, contest or, super users or something, decide on a group of people who want to come to Quebec City. Like, I'll get in the car now. Actually, I'll be there in a few hours. Okay, many hours. But it would be brilliant to have a Waverly sponsored Quebec tournament in Quebec City. I would love
That,
that.
that would be super funny.
Right? It's
Maybe we'll
super.
do it. Like
It's
the
meta.
timing would be perfect.
If it has to be people that only met on Waverly, though.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the. Phil, this is. I have to say, I'm. In a world where there is so much cynicism and negativity, and where there is a lot of concern about the implications of AI and technology, you're a very refreshing voice. I very much appreciate your time and the consideration that you're putting into this product. And I wish you all the best. I wish you very well with this endeavor. I think it's wonderful.
Thanks a lot, Brody. It was a real pleasure.
That was great. That was so much fun talking to Phil. I want to play his board game. I want to play his board game. I want to go to Quebec City and play his board game. I want access to Waverly. Right now, I've been invited. I'm got an invite, but it's only for iOS, and I'm still an Android guy, so I'm gonna have to wait a little longer. That's the pod this week. Thank you for listening. As always, special thanks to Dark Tapes for providing music for this podcast. Thanks, Phil, for a really interesting conversation. If you want to follow me more, you can find me in all the regular places. But please sign up for my newsletter at Growdy, GROWDY .wtf, Growdy.wtf, for more news about automotive technology and energy. Thanks.